Right, so here's something I noticed a while back and haven't really been able to unnotice since. The angriest character in the Amazing World of Gumball is also the only one in that house who knows where anything is. That's it. That's the observation that started all of this. Everyone else in Elmore is a walking disaster with a catchphrase. And then there's Nicole, who has flaming eyeballs and a working filing system. And somehow those two things live in the same woman without the show ever really making a fuss about it. I've been watching this show on and off for years. Started because it was on, kept going because it's funnier than it has any business being. And then at some point I stopped laughing at the mum and started sort of squinting at her. Because there's a lot there. There's genuinely a lot there. More than a show about a blue cat and his goldfish brother needs to bother with. So that's what tonight is. About 2 hours of me talking about a cartoon cat's inner life, which I'm aware sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. It isn't a mystery. There's no twist. Nothing builds to anything. If you drift off in 20 minutes, you haven't missed a payoff. Because I'm not saving one. Every bit of this sits next to every other bit, rather than on top of it. If you like this sort of thing, the subscribe button's there, and it's free, and it helps a lot. That's the whole pitch. I won't bring it up again. I should say up front that I'm not going to pretend she's a saint. That's the version of Nicole that lives on the internet. This sort of long-suffering angel who deserves better. And I think that reading is about 60% right and 40% people not paying attention. She's also awful sometimes. Properly awful. We'll get there. But I'm not going to lead with it because leading with it would be a bit smug. And honestly, the interesting part isn't that she's flawed. Loads of cartoon characters are flawed. The interesting part is the shape of the flaw and where it came from, and the fact that the show clearly knows exactly where it came from and just quietly puts the evidence in front of you across about 8 seasons without ever underlining it. What I keep coming back to is that she's the only character in Elmore who seems to be carrying something. Gumball has no interior life to speak of, and I mean that affectionately. Richard has one setting. Anais is 4 and terrifying. Darwin is a fish who is nice. Nicole is a woman with a childhood, a career, a marriage, a rivalry, a list of things she wanted and didn't get, and a temper that the show treats as both her greatest asset and a genuine unresolved problem it never fixes. That last part is the bit I find remarkable, actually. Cartoons usually fix things. Somebody learns something. Nicole doesn't really learn anything. She goes to anger management and she stays angry. I love that. I think it's the most honest thing in the whole show. Anyway, I want to start with money because I think everything else in her life is downstream of it. And because the number is so specific and so bleak that once you know it, you can't watch the show the same way again. $950 a month. That's what Nicole Watterson earns at the Rainbow Factory. The show tells us this in an episode called The Treasure, almost in passing, the way you'd mention someone's shoe size. $950 a month. For a family of 5, in a house they own, in a town that regularly explodes. I had to sit with that one for a bit, because the maths doesn't work. It isn't close to working. That's not a tight month. That's not belt tightening. That's a number that cannot support a single adult in any American town I'm aware of. Never mind an adult, another adult who doesn't work, 2 boys, a small rabbit genius, and whatever the insurance situation is on a house that gets destroyed roughly once a fortnight. And the show knows. There's a running joke in The Parents that she's paid in literal peanuts, which is the kind of gag that only lands if the writers have already decided the salary's absurd. And the thing I find genuinely lovely about it is that the show never makes it sad. Like, it would be so easy. You've got a mother working full-time for less than nothing while her husband naps on the sofa, and every cartoon instinct in the world says you play a sad piano and have her stare out of a window. Gumball almost never does that. The poverty is just the weather. It's there, it's constant, it's occasionally the plot, and nobody in that house treats it as a tragedy because it's just the shape of their life. She's been at the factory 5 years, by the way. That comes from the worst 5 years, which sounds like a long time until you clock that Gumball is 12, which means for the first 7 years of her son's life, she was doing something else entirely, and the show never once tells us what. That's a real gap. I want to be clear about that. It isn't a secret being withheld for a later reveal. It's just a blank. Her occupation before the Rainbow Factory is genuinely unknown, in the same way that most people's mums had a whole career before you existed that you have never once asked about and probably couldn't describe, which, when you put it like that, is almost too on the nose. The factory itself was still under construction when Gumball was 4. You can see it in The Origins Part 2, this half-built thing in the background of her life. So somewhere in there is a woman who watched a factory go up and thought, well, that's where I'm going. And what does she do there? Sales, apparently. She sits at a desk. In one episode, she ends up working from inside an air duct. In another, she's working from inside a locker. The show is very funny about the physical indignity of her job, in a way it never is about the emotional indignity, which I think is a deliberate choice and a smart one. You don't need her to say the job is soul-destroying if you've just shown her filing spreadsheets from a locker. Now here's where I think the philosophy actually is, and I promise this is the only time I'll get slightly grand about it. There's a whole tradition of thinking about people who endure difficult circumstances with dignity. Stoicism, that whole business. Accept what you cannot change, focus on what's yours to control, all of that. And you could absolutely read Nicole that way. She's got the discipline, she's got the self-control, she's got the fortress of the mind energy when she needs it. Except that's not what's happening. Not really, because a Stoic has made peace with the circumstances, and Nicole hasn't made peace with anything. She's not accepting the $950, she's just doing arithmetic with it. Every morning she wakes up and solves the same unsolvable sum, and then she does it again tomorrow, and the acceptance never arrives. It's not serenity, it's persistence with the serenity removed. Which, and I say this with real affection, is how most people I know actually live. Nobody's making peace with anything. They're just doing the sum. One thing that always fascinated me is how the show handles her relationship to the family's money problems, because she's not the one who caused them. In The Money, the family discovers the credit card is empty because Richard converted their savings into gold and threw it into the sea, which he had reasons for. They were not good reasons. And Nicole's response is to turn into a hulking, muscular beast, obviously, and then to be immediately diffused by Richard, being adorable at her, which is a dynamic we'll come back to, but watch what happens after. Their stuff gets repossessed. The kids wake up on the roof because the beds are gone, and Nicole tucks them in on the roof. She says goodnight. She doesn't cry about it, she doesn't apologise for it, she just does the parenting available to her in the situation she's got, which happens to be tucking 3 children into a roof. Then she calls the repossession goblin a low-life, bottom-feeding, undereducated, unhygienic, slimy, no-neck, toxic, triple-chinned, oxygen-wasting, crude, gutless, foul-smelling, buck-toothed, corrupt, felonious, disgraceful, disease-ridden, bow-legged, yellow-bellied, backstabbing, ghoulish, vulgar, despicable, worm-headed, worthless stain, which is my favourite line reading in the entire show, and the goblin bursts into tears and says he's only doing his job. I think that's the section, honestly. That's the whole thing in one scene. She has no money, no power, no leverage, no way out, and the only weapon she has left is her voice. And she uses it on a minimum wage goblin who is also poor. It's not noble, it's not even effective, it's just what's available. Sort of like how, when your day's gone badly, the person who gets it is never the person who caused it. It's whoever rings you about your car's extended warranty. It's called the Rainbow Factory, by the way. That's the name. Nobody in the show has ever explained what a Rainbow Factory manufactures, and the deeper I got into this, the funnier that became. Rainbows are not a product. You cannot warehouse them. And yet there's a building with a car park with departments, with a sales team, and Nicole is on that team, and she wears a little striped pin on her shirt every single day to indicate her allegiance to it. She wears the pin. That's the detail. She wears the badge of the company that pays her in peanuts every day, and it's the only decorative thing she owns. And I don't think that's cynicism on the show's part. I think it's accurate. People do that. People put the lanyard on. Not because they've been fooled, but because you've got to hang the day off something, and the pin is what's on offer. The other thing that's odd about it is that the work is genuinely invisible. We almost never see what she actually does. We see her at a desk. We see her being harassed at a desk. We see her filing something from inside a duct. But the labour itself is never dramatised, which is unusual, because shows love a montage of somebody being good at their job. Nicole is never shown being good at her job. Not once, as far as I can find, except for preventing explosions. She's shown being present at it. And there's a difference. And I think the difference is deliberate, because being good at it would imply the job is worth being good at. And the show is not prepared to make that claim. There is one exception, sort of. In The Fury, she saves the factory from blowing up. So the one time we see her succeed at work, it's by preventing the workplace from exploding, which is not on anyone's job description. I keep thinking about the fact that a rainbow is the least useful thing you could build a factory around. It's not a thing. It's light bending in water. It's what happens when the weather can't decide. And that's where she goes, every day, to manufacture something that only exists as a side effect. I'm probably reading too much into it. It's probably just a funny name somebody picked because it's colourful and it's a cartoon. But I'd point out that Bockeley's first idea for this show was too sad for the producers. And I do wonder how much of the sad version got smuggled in wearing a nice colour. The other decision worth clocking is that they made the Wattersons properly poor. Not sitcom poor, where the house is enormous and everyone's got new trainers and someone mentions money's tight once a season. Poor structurally, which removes the option every other show in this genre leans on, which is things getting better. There's no Ray's episode available. The number's too far off for an episode to reach. So the show can't give her hope, and it doesn't try, and what it does instead is give her a Tuesday, over and over, and she takes it. Anyway, that's the money. Since we're on the subject of things she never got to choose, let's talk about her name. Her first name is Doctor. Not a title, not an honorific, not a joke somebody made once. Her legal first name, as revealed in the episode The Parents, is Doctor. Nicole is her middle name. She has spent her entire adult life going by her middle name because her parents named her after a job they wanted her to have. And the gag is that they didn't even do it for the credential. They did it so that when someone shouted, "Is there a doctor in the house?" they could say yes, which Nicole points out doesn't work because people choking on a chicken wing rarely stay conscious long enough to enjoy the punchline. Her delivery on that line is so tired. It's the tiredness of a woman who has explained this before. So that's Daniel and Mary Senecourt, her parents. Dad has a temper, Mum is a perfectionist. And if you've been paying any attention at all to Nicole for the last however many seasons, you've just watched two puzzle pieces click together in real time. And it's almost annoying how neat it is. The rage is his. The impossible standards are hers. Nicole is what happens when those two things have a child and give it a career for a name. The detail that gets me every time is the blood transfusion. She needed a transfusion as a kid. She has B negative blood. Her father gave her A positive because, and I want to stress that this is his actual stated reasoning, why settle for B minus when you can have A plus? Which is a joke. It's a very good joke, but it's also, if you think about it for 2 seconds, a man who nearly killed his daughter because he couldn't stand the letter B. That's the household, that's the environment. The pun took priority over the child's circulatory system. There's a flashback in that episode of Nicole as a kid, and it's about 4 seconds long, and it does more work than most character arcs. She's playing the violin, then she uses the violin to hit an incoming baseball over a goalpost. Then she's running hurdles. Then she leaps an enormous distance into a chair at a chessboard. All of it happening at once, all of it one continuous motion, because her parents enrolled her in every after-school club that existed. And when she brings this up as a grievance, her mother's defense is that they gave her every possible chance to succeed. And Nicole says, yeah, all at the same time. I love that exchange because both people are telling the truth. That's what makes it work. Mary isn't lying. They did give her every chance. They also gave her all of them simultaneously at 8 years old, which turns opportunity into a kind of pressure that doesn't have a name yet. She left at 18, walked out. Her parents disapproved of Richard, and their expectations were somewhere in orbit, and she'd had enough of both. So she went. 18 years old, no money, no plan, and she never spoke to them again for 20 years. Here's what I think that means, and it's the bit I keep chewing on. Nicole's perfectionism isn't a personality trait. It's a hand-me-down. It's the family jumper. She didn't develop high standards because she's driven. She inherited them, the way you inherit a nose. And by the time she noticed she had them, they were already load-bearing. You can watch her do it to her own kids sometimes. Not the same way, she's much better than her parents were. That's not a high bar, but she clears it easily. But the reflex is there. The wanting it to be right is there, humming underneath. That's the thing about being raised as a project. You don't stop being a project when you leave. You just become your own project manager, which is worse because now nobody's making you do it. There's a nice little continuity mess here that I feel obliged to mention because it lives rent-free in my head. Her maiden name is Senecourt, established in The Choices. But if you freeze-frame her yearbook photo in a much earlier episode called The Wand, her maiden name starts with a G, which is not a mystery. It's a show that ran for years and changed its mind. I'm not going to resolve it. I just enjoy that it's there. The other thing worth sitting with is what the name Doctor actually tells you about how these people saw their kid. Naming a child after an outcome is a strange thing to do. It means the child arrived as a plan already in progress. Whatever Nicole was going to turn out to be, the paperwork had already been filed, and she didn't become a doctor. Obviously, she works at a rainbow factory, in an office cubicle occasionally. She is, by every metric her parents built for her, a failure. She never went to university. She married the man they told her not to marry. She lives in a house that keeps getting repossessed. If you asked Daniel and Mary Senecourt to grade her, you'd get a B-, and they'd swap it out for an A+ without asking. And that would somehow be worse. Here's a fun detail to end on though. Her grandfather, according to a throwaway line in a season 1 episode, lived to 102, which is contradicted almost immediately by his appearance later. So it's another wobble, but I like the image of it anyway. This man who couldn't accept a B, going on for a century. The thing people get wrong about perfectionism is they think it's about high standards. It isn't. High standards are fine. High standards are just taste with a spine. Perfectionism is different, because perfectionism is about the gap. It's the permanent distance between the thing and the version of the thing in your head. And the distance never closes, because the version in your head updates every time you get closer. So you can't win. That's not a side effect. That's the design. And when you're raised in it, you don't experience it as pressure from outside. You experience it as reality. You don't think, my parents have unreasonable expectations. You think, I am behind. Those are completely different sentences, and they feel identical from the inside. Watch Nicole clean. That's where you see it. She cleans, and 2 minutes later, there's a mess because there are 3 children, and she is genuinely baffled by it. There's a bit in The List where she's just finished cleaning and asks how they could possibly have made a mess that fast, and Gumball says, just by being kids, I guess. Just by being kids. And she has no answer to that, because there isn't one. The mess is not a failure of her cleaning. The mess is what a house with children in it looks like. But you cannot explain that to somebody who was graded on outcomes at 8 years old, while simultaneously playing the violin and running hurdles. She's not trying to have a tidy house. She's trying to close the gap. And you cannot close the gap with children in the building, because children are the gap, walking around, asking for cereal, which is why I think the show is right to never fix her. If she stopped, she'd have to sit down. And if she sat down, the sun would show up. And we've been through what happens then. The thing about hand-me-downs is you can't return them either. There's no shop. Your parents didn't keep the receipt for the personality they gave you. You just wear it, and occasionally notice it doesn't fit, and then keep wearing it, because it's yours now, and it's the only one you've got. Anyway, she got out at 18 with nothing, and I want to talk about what she thought she was going to do with the freedom. There's a shot at the start of an episode called The List that I think about more than is reasonable. It's a woman sitting on the edge of her bed with a cardboard box open next to her, going through her own childhood, old photos, bits and pieces, nothing dramatic. She's not crying. She's just looking, and there's a sigh, and that's the shot. Every single person watching that show, over the age of about 25, felt something in their chest. And every single person under 12 thought, right, when's the cat going to fall over? What she's holding is a list of dreams. And she's got another list, a list of chores, and she says the line that the whole episode is built on, which is that when you grow up, reality gets in the way of your ambitions. Gumball and Darwin, who are good boys in the way that a golden retriever is a good boy, decide that they'll do her chores for her so she can have a day off. And she hands them the wrong list. She gives them the dreams by mistake. So they go off and do her bucket list. They get her a degree, sort of, by buying one in holistic medicine online and printing it out, at which point Gary collapses in front of them, and they attempt to treat him with a variety of gemstones and a ring of candles. They beat a Shaolin monk, technically, by walking up behind a meditating monk and hitting him with a frying pan. They climb a mountain, by which I mean they achieve marginal ascension and call it climbing. They learn Spanish, they take Chad Johnson to prom, and when Nicole finally catches up with them, they're dragging a dolphin up a beach. She wrote that list when she was 16. That's the number that does it for me. 16. 2 years before she walked out of her parents' house. So she was writing a list of everything she wanted while she was still in the middle of being told what she wanted, which means that list is basically a document of rebellion. Beat a monk. See the world. Learn a language nobody's making you learn. None of it is a career. None of it is doctor. And here's the detail that I always come back to, because it's a 2-second thing that most people watching wouldn't even register. In that first shot in the box of memorabilia, there's a birthday card signed by Yuki. We'll get to Yuki, but the fact that a card from a woman who currently drives past her house and screams the word coward at it is in the memory box, kept for 30-odd years, is the kind of detail that a show only puts in when it actually loves the character. Now, the reason this episode works and doesn't just curdle into a pity party is Darwin, of all people. Because Nicole gets upset, understandably, that her 16-year-old self's list has been ticked off by 2 idiots with a frying pan. And Darwin points out that the actual lie in her life isn't that she gave things up. It's the story she tells herself that there's no opportunity to do any of it now. Which is a genuinely sharp bit of writing coming out of a goldfish. They finish the list with a trip around the world, which they do on Elmore maps, sitting at a computer, clicking through Street View together. And it's ridiculous, and it's also completely sincere, and the episode just lets both of those things be true. I want to be careful here, because there's a version of this section where I get sentimental and start talking about how she sacrificed everything for her family. And I don't actually think that's what the episode says. It's close to what it says, but it isn't it. Because the alternative that Gumball paints for her, the life where she never had them, isn't a life where she achieved the list. It's a life where she's a noblewoman being waited on by servants and getting invitations from the Duke of Camembert. And it's a fantasy, and the show knows it's a fantasy because Gumball's making it up as he goes. He gets about 40 seconds into it before he sabotages his own story by adding that the rich husband chews his toenails. That's not sacrifice. That's just what happened. The list didn't get traded for the kids. The list got traded for time, and time is the thing everyone loses regardless. Here's a fun fact that I found and then had to immediately put an asterisk on. According to the official Japanese website for the show, Nicole originally wanted to be a painter and gave it up to provide for her family. Which is a lovely detail. It also has never appeared in a single episode. It's not in any script, it's not in any flashback, it's a line on a website in another country. So I'm mentioning it because it's interesting, not because it's true, and I think there's a difference, and I try to stay on the right side of it. What is on screen is that she never went to college. She says it plainly in this episode. She always thought she would, and then she didn't, and the sentence is delivered in about the same tone you'd use to say, "You always meant to fix the fence." I think that's the honest version of how ambition dies, by the way. Not in a big moment. There's no scene where you renounce it. It just quietly stops being scheduled. Sort of like how our parents used to talk about how hard things were back in the day whenever we complained about anything. There was never a day they decided to become the person who says that. It just gradually became the available material. I think the reason the bucket list gag lands so hard is that a bucket list is a fundamentally strange document to have written at 16. Because at 16, you don't have a bucket. You've got the whole thing ahead of you. A bucket list at 16 isn't a list of things you want to do before you die. It's just a list of things you want to do, which is a much sadder document to find 30 years later, because it means at some point the word bucket got added without anybody announcing it. The other thing about that list is how modest it is when you actually read it. Learn Spanish, climb a mountain, go around the world, take a specific boy to prom. These are not enormous ambitions. Nobody's asking for the moon. A determined person with a normal life gets through most of that by 50. She got through none of it. And the reason isn't that she aimed too high. She aimed extremely reasonably. The reason is that there was never a spare Saturday. That's the bit that gets people, I reckon. Not the tragedy of a thwarted genius, because she's not a thwarted genius. She's a woman who wanted to see some places. It's that the list was completely achievable, and the achieving of it required a resource she has never once had, which is an unclaimed afternoon. And when the boys do finally tick it off for her, they do it wrong on purpose. That's the joke. The degree is printed off the internet. The monk gets hit with a pan. The mountain is a small hill approached optimistically. None of it counts, except the show lets it count. That's the move. Nobody in that episode says, well, that doesn't count. They go around the world on Street View and it counts, because the alternative is that it never happens at all. And a version that happened badly is still a version that happened. I don't know. I find that quite decent, actually. It'd be easy to be sniffy about it. Sitting at a computer, clicking through photos of places you'll never stand in. But I've done that. You've done that. That's most of the internet. And that brings us to the episode everyone brings up. Here's a thing people do. You've done it, I've done it, everyone does it. You take a decision you made years ago, and you rewind to it and you run it again with different inputs. What if I'd taken the other job? What if I'd stayed? What if I'd said the thing? The reason we do it is that it feels like analysis. It feels productive. You're gathering information about your own life. You aren't, though. That's the trick. And there's an 11-minute episode of a Cartoon Network show that understands this better than most people I've met. The Choices opens on a dinner going wrong. Nicole's trying to cook. The kids are impatient and rude. Richard is no help whatsoever. The dinner turns into a chaotic disaster, and Darwin annoys her, and she's about to go off. Properly go off. And then from her perspective, time stops, and she asks herself the question, how did I get here? And she traces it back, not to the dinner, not to the kids, but to one specific day, the day she met Richard. So we go back, and the episode runs the branches. Branch 1 is a boy called Bob. Branch 2 is Harold Wilson, who you'll know as Tobias's dad, who is rich and who is also a nightmare. He tells her to keep the veil on at their own wedding. Later, she's had extensive work done. She's spent hours making him sushi, and he complains that it's cold. That's the rich life. That's the upgrade. There's a branch where she becomes a dictator, which they stage in front of a sculpture of the Ryugyong Hotel. And I only know that because I looked it up, and now you know it too. There's a branch where she gets into alternative medicine and simply dies. That's it. No irony, no punchline. She just dies of not getting real treatment. And the escalation is the joke. Each alternate life is worse than the last, running from a life that's merely bad down to immediate death, until the only conclusion available is that the life she's got is the best one on the board. Now, if the episode stopped there, it would be a bad episode. It would be a smug little fable about how you should be grateful, actually, and I would not be talking about it 2 hours before bed. But it doesn't stop there, because the branches aren't the point. They're the setup. The point is what happens when she stops running them. She remembers instead. Not hypothetically, she remembers the actual thing. The studio flat by the train station, the instant noodles, the wedding in the park that her parents didn't come to, Richard holding a newborn gumball with a carton of milk taped to his stomach so he could feed him while she slept, the dilapidated house they moved into and slowly repaired over months. Gumball taking his first steps while Richard was painting the front of the house, and getting so excited he threw the paint can and hit Mr. Robinson, who was minding his own business, mowing his lawn. The height chart, where Gumball's excited about how tall he's got, and then draws a line at Richard's side, and backs up to show the several other lines behind it marking how wide he's got. And they all laugh. None of that is an argument. That's what I like about it. She doesn't win the debate. She just stops having it. And then she goes back to the frozen dinner, unfreezes, and starts a food fight. That's the ending. Not a speech, not a tearful I love you all. She picks up food and throws it at her family. And that's the thesis. The philosophy of Nicole Watterson, if you want one sentence for it, is that the counterfactual is not a real place, and you cannot live in it. Because here's the flaw in the whole exercise, and the episode is quietly ruthless about it. When you run the other version of your life, you're not comparing two lives. You're comparing a life you've actually lived, with all the fires and the whipped cream and the Tuesday afternoons, against a highlight reel you're writing yourself, in a mood, at the exact moment you're least equipped to write it. It isn't a fair fight. The real one is always going to lose, because the real one has actual detail in it, and detail is where disappointment lives. The show handles this by cheating in the opposite direction. It makes the alternatives ludicrous. She dies, she becomes a despot, she marries a man who reviews her sushi. And that's a bit of a stack, I'll grant you. But it's a stack that gets to the right answer, which is that you are never comparing like with like. There's a lovely bit of housekeeping I have to flag, because I did the reading and I'm going to be that person about it. This episode contradicts other episodes. In The Treasure, Gumball was born and Nicole stayed in hospital with him a while longer, because he was, and I quote the show here, an ugly baby, while Richard was already at the house. In The Choices, all three of them walk into the house for the first time together, and the baby's perfectly normal looking. The wedding's in a park here, and outside a church elsewhere, in a different dress. I'm not going to adjudicate that. Shows run for years and change their minds. I just think it's funny that the most emotionally precise episode in the series is also the one where the continuity gives up. One last thing before I move on. The reason the day she met Richard is the branch point, rather than, say, the day she left home, is that meeting Richard is the only decision in the flashbacks that Nicole made entirely on her own. Everything else was assigned. That's the one she chose. So of course that's the one she goes back and pokes at, because it's the only one where the blame would land on her. When time freezes and she starts running the branches, the question she asks isn't, "What went wrong?" It's, "How did I get here?" Which is a completely different question, and I don't think that's an accident of the writing. What went wrong assumes something broke. How did I get here just wants the root. And people usually ask the first one. That's what makes her odd. She sat there covered in whipped cream, with the dinner on fire, at the exact moment where any reasonable person is drafting an accusation. And what she actually wants is the map. Not who to blame, just a sequence. That's a very Nicole way to have a breakdown, isn't it? Even her existential crisis is administrative. But talking a bit about the temper, because I've been dancing around it for 20 minutes. Let's do the physics first, because the physics is genuinely mad, and I don't think people appreciate how far the show takes it. When Nicole gets angry, her eyeballs catch fire. That's not a metaphor, and it's not a one-off. It happens in The Responsible, it happens in The Authority, it happens in The Vacation, it happens in The Oracle, it happens in The Fury. It's an established physical property of her face. She can snap her fingers and produce a shockwave that covers the entire neighbourhood. She has, on separate occasions, produced a shockwave down a supermarket aisle purely by looking. She once set a marshmallow on fire by staring at it in a manner that made Richard immediately back down. In the castle, she gives a man what can only be described as a penance stare, and he simply starts cleaning the house. In the finale, she prizes a door open with her bare hands. In the DVD, she chases her own children across the neighbourhood whilst riding an angry dog. Riding an angry dog. That's canon. Nobody comments on it. And Gumball, who is her son, and therefore an authority, says that the test results came back, and his mum isn't 90% water, she's 90% anger. In another episode, he calculates that it would be less frightening to fight Tina, who is a Tyrannosaurus, than to be told off by his mother. Darwin agrees. They both agree quite quickly, so the rage is a superpower. That's the surface reading, and it's not wrong. The show cashes it in constantly. When something needs doing in Elmore, Nicole's fury is the tool that does it. She gets things done faster than anyone else in that town, precisely because she's furious about them. But here's what I actually want to talk about, because it's the bit that makes her interesting, rather than just loud. She goes to anger management. It's in an episode called The Club. It's a throwaway. Blink and you'd miss it. Nicole attends an anger management group at the school with Mr. Small, who is a hippie guidance counsellor and about as much use as a chocolate teapot. And she goes to an anger management group, voluntarily. And it doesn't work. Nothing changes. She's exactly as angry the next episode and the episode after that, and in season 6. She goes to the group and she keeps going, and she stays exactly the same. I think that's one of the most quietly honest things in the show, and I don't think it's an accident. Because the alternative, the version where she goes to the group and learns to breathe and becomes serene, would be a lie. That's not how it goes. People go to the thing for years. People know exactly what their problem is, can describe it in detail, could give a lecture on it, and then the thing happens, and they're back in it and the lecture's no help at all. Knowing why you're like this and stopping being like this are completely unrelated projects. Nicole is fluent in the first and has made no progress on the second. There's a companion episode to this, sort of, called The Painting, where Principal Brown tries to fix the family based on a painting. She needs something to clean or fix or work on, and without it she starts to come apart. The fandom's diagnosis for that is usually some flavour of compulsion, and I don't think it's that clinical, honestly. I think if your entire life is arithmetic that doesn't balance, sitting still is the worst thing you can do, because sitting still is when the sum shows up. The one that stings, though, is the helmet. She loses her temper, trashes an office, and it costs her a job opportunity, an actual, real, better than this one. And afterwards, she blames Richard. She never takes responsibility for it. Not really. And I've seen people online be quite harsh about that, and I understand the instinct, but I'd push back a bit. Because the thing about a temper you inherited from your father is that it doesn't feel like something you're doing. It feels like something that's happening. The blame has to go somewhere, and it's not going to go to the man who nearly gave you the wrong blood type out of pride, because you haven't spoken to him since you were 18, and he's not in the room. And here's where I'll say the thing I think is actually true about her anger, and then I'll leave it alone. Her rage isn't a flaw in her philosophy. It is her philosophy. It's the only part of her that never learned to negotiate. Everything else about Nicole has been sanded down by circumstance. She compromised on the career, the education, the money, the list. The temper is the one thing that never accepted a worse deal. It's the last piece of her that still thinks she's owed something, which is why the show can't fix it. Fixing it would mean she'd finally agreed to the terms. I'd add that the show is careful never to let her be right about it either. She's not a righteous avenger. She's a woman who screams at a repossession goblin. The anger is not aimed well. It almost never lands on the people who deserve it, because the people who deserve it are a lifetime and one continent away. The show does this thing where her anger keeps having useful outcomes, and I think it's a bit of a trap for the audience. She stops Richard from destroying the universe. She saves the kids and Masami from a collapsing building. She drives turtle hatchlings out of Elmore and saves the whole town. She gets the house back off a man called Harold and a load of partygoers by giving him a look that makes him start tidying. She helps stop the factory going up. Over and over, the fury turns out to have been the correct tool. So you start to think it's a virtue. That's the trap. You start reading it as this justified, righteous force because the show keeps rewarding it. And then you look at the actual distribution and it falls apart. Because for every universe she saves, there's a repossession goblin crying, or a job opportunity in bits, or 2 boys not being allowed dinner. The rage doesn't aim, it goes off. Sometimes what's in front of it is a collapsing building, and sometimes what's in front of it is Larry. I think the honest description is that it's a weather system. It's not a decision she's making, and the show gives it the courtesy of consequences roughly half the time, which is about the same hit rate as real weather. There's a nice bit of evidence for this in the fact that Nicole is the only Watterson who never directly encounters Rob. Rob's the actual antagonist, the one with a genuine grievance and a plan, and she does meet him, which I think is funny for reasons the show probably didn't intend. The one member of that family who could resolve the whole Rob situation in 4 seconds is never in the room because she's at work. The absent mother concept doing one last bit of work from beyond the design document. Anyway, there's one word that sets her off worse than any other, and it's worth knowing where it came from. There's a moment in a season 1 episode where a cake hits the floor in slow motion, and I'd argue it's the single best piece of character work the show ever did, and it happens about 2 episodes in, before anyone had any right to expect it. The episode is The Ape. The setup is simple. Miss Simeon, the boys' teacher, who is a monkey with a tail despite the episode's title, has an enormous collection of trophies. Every award a teacher can win, she's won, except one, the Favourite Teacher Award, which requires a student nomination, which she will never get because nobody likes her, because she's the worst person in Elmore by a comfortable margin. So she fakes a friendship with the Wattersons. She turns up at the house. Nicole immediately wants her off the property, which fair, but the boys and Richard take pity on her, and Gumball and Darwin decide to teach her how to have friends, which is a whole comic sequence. They try to play a card game and quit because every card is about her. Gumball tries to demonstrate sharing using imaginary ice cream, and it gets so uncomfortable their tongues nearly touch. He tries to teach her a high five, and she smacks him in the face. And by the end of it, Nicole has softened. She's baked a cake. She has decided out loud that Miss Simeon deserves a second chance. And then Rocky, the janitor, who has no idea what he's doing, mentions that Miss Simeon has just driven off dancing and laughing about how she finally got some losers to write her nomination. Slow motion. The cake leaves her hands. It hits the floor and shatters. And then we get 4 seconds of flashback. Nicole as a baby in daycare, taking her first steps. She falls, her eyes well up. And Lucy Simeon over her says, "Nice first steps, loser." Nicole as a kid on a bike, hits a rock and goes over the handlebars. "Nice cycling, loser." Nicole as a teenager, at her desk, and Simeon is holding a poem she's written. "Nice poem, loser." And she says the word poem with the quotation marks in her voice, which is somehow the worst part. Nicole at prom, permed hair, pink dress. "Nice hair, loser." Nicole at her own wedding, in the dress next to Richard. And Miss Simeon drives past and shouts, "Nice husband, loser," and cackles, and Nicole just smiles, embarrassed, on her wedding day. That's it. That's the whole flashback. 4 beats, maybe 6 seconds of screen time, in a season 1 episode of a cartoon about a blue cat. And it reframes everything, because it means Lucy Simeon was not just a teacher Nicole disliked. She was there for the first steps. She was there for the bike. She was there for the poem and the prom and the wedding. This woman has been present at every single formative moment of Nicole's life, and at every single one of them, she has said the same word. Her first steps. She got called a loser for her first steps. She was, 1? Less? I remember watching that and just going, "Oh," out loud, on my own, to nobody. Because that's not bullying, is it? That's not a school thing you grow out of. That's a lifetime installation. It's scaffolding. By the time you're an adult, you don't need Miss Simeon in the room anymore, because the word's been said so many times, at so many different ages, that it's just running on its own now. It's part of the building, and the show never says any of this. That's what I keep banging on about. There's no scene where Nicole explains that she has a complex about the word loser. There's no therapy episode. There's just this 4-second montage, and then a car chase, because the rest of the episode is a car chase. She gets the whole family in the car and pursues Miss Simeon down the motorway. She rams her. She has Darwin machine gun hard candy at the windscreen. She has the kids throw things. She sends Richard out onto the bonnet of a moving vehicle to retrieve the nomination letter, which I want to note is the same woman who spends every other episode of this show terrified that her children will be harmed. That's the tell, by the way. That's how you know it's not proportionate. Nicole's entire operating system is built around her family's safety, and one word from one baboon overrides the operating system completely. Gumball, of all people, is the one who's uncomfortable with it. Gumball, the boy who once tried to assassinate a balloon. He's sitting there going, "Mum, what are you doing?" And she says, "Something I should have done a long time ago." A long time ago. She's not talking about the cake. She's talking about the first steps. It ends with Miss Simeon's car going over the edge of an unfinished overpass, and her hanging there, and Gumball offering her one last chance, telling her they can still be friends. And she rejects it. She takes the letter instead and falls, and she gets the award, and she says it was worth it. Which is bleak, actually, because it means there was never a redemption available. The second chance Nicole was willing to give was never going to be taken. I do think, and I'll be honest, the episode lets Nicole off a bit lightly. She endangered her children over a piece of paper, and the show shrugs. But I'd also say that's the most realistic thing about it. That's how the thing works. The wound doesn't ask whether the response is proportionate. It just files a request, and the body carries it out. There's a smaller detail I like. Miss Simeon's license plate number is 66,666, which is the same as the Donut Cop's police car, which means either the show is making a point about institutions or somebody in the art department reused an asset. I choose to believe both. What makes the flashback work, and I'm aware I've been on 6 seconds of animation for a while now, is the order. First steps. Bike, poem, prom, wedding. That's not a random selection of humiliations. Every single one of those is a first. Her first walk, her first bit of independence, her first attempt at making something, her first go at being looked at, her first commitment, every threshold in her life, and at each one, the same voice, saying the same word. If you'd shuffled them, it wouldn't land. If it were 5 random Tuesdays where Simeon was rude to her, it'd just be bullying. And bullying is sad, but it's ordinary. It's the fact that they're all thresholds. She's never crossed a line in her life without being told she failed at it. And the poem's the one that does me in, personally. Because the poem's the only one where she made something. The others are things that happen to her or things everyone does. The poem is the one where she sat down and produced an object out of her own head and handed it to an adult. And the adult said, "Nice poem," with the voice quotes, "I don't think you write again after that." Not seriously. And I notice, and I want to be careful here because I flagged earlier that the painter business isn't canon, but I noticed that the closest thing we have to an artistic ambition for this woman is on a website in another country and never once on screen, which is either a coincidence or the tidiest thing in the entire series. Somebody at a desk in Japan wrote that she wanted to be a painter, and somebody in Britain wrote a scene where a monkey looked at her poem and laughed, and those two people almost certainly never spoke. Anyway, Simeon isn't the only ghost from her childhood who turned up as an adult with a grudge. There's another one, and that one Nicole handles completely differently, and I find the difference fascinating. The interesting thing about a woman who fights everything is the one time she doesn't. Nicole refuses exactly one fight in the entire run of this show, and she refuses it for about 9 minutes, and she takes an absolutely spectacular amount of abuse in order to keep refusing it. I think it's the best thing she ever does. It's also the thing her children understand least, which is sort of the joke. Right, Yuki Yoshida. Yuki is Masami's mother. Cloud woman, business suit, heels, absolutely terrifying. And she turns up outside Elmore Junior High one morning and says she's waited a long time for this. And Nicole turns around and the colour goes out of her. Yuki wants a rematch. Nicole says it was nice seeing her and walks away. And Yuki starts screaming coward at her in the car park. The kids cannot process this. That's the entire B-plot. Gumball, Darwin and Anais spend the whole school day trying to work out what's happened because their mother, who once rode an angry dog, walked away from a fight. Anais says she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Maybe Mum's afraid. And Gumball says he never thought he'd hear the words Mum and afraid in the same sentence, unless the sentence was, "I'm really afraid of your mum." Meanwhile, Yuki escalates. Properly escalates. She sprays the word coward across the side of Nicole's car. Nicole picks the kids up in it and says, "Oh, it's just a scratch, seatbelts please." She spells coward out in fire on the front lawn. She turns up at the supermarket and flirts with Richard, tells him he looks more handsome than ever, asks what a man like him is doing with a woman like her, and Richard, bless him, says, "Shh, I don't think she knows she could do better." Then it moves to work. Because Yuki's husband owns the Rainbow Factory. So Yuki takes Nicole's desk, points her to a tiny squashed one in the corner, and Nicole just goes and sits at it. Yuki empties an entire jar of mayonnaise into her sandwich and then slams paperwork onto it, and Nicole tries to eat it anyway. She ends up working from inside a locker, then from inside an air duct, until Yuki pulls the plug on her laptop. Then there's a bit at the lift where Yuki just closes the doors on her over and over, and then opens them, and then presses every button and walks out. And Nicole's response to the gum on her locker is, honestly, compared to the rest of the stuff you've been doing, this is pretty tame. She's not enjoying it. She goes home and body slams herself onto the sofa, and the kids look at her with pity. Richard tries to cheer everyone up by putting melons on his backside and drumming on them, which is his best material. So why won't she fight? Masami explains it, and this is where the show does something I still find quite beautiful. The backstory is told in manga panels. Actual manga panels, colour and all, drawn in a style that's basically early Dragon Ball. Nicole and Yuki as kids, in GIs training karate together under Yuki's father. Best friends, both prodigies, both entering competitions, and then the tournament brings them to the final, against each other. Yuki should have won easily, but Nicole's fighting spirit carried her through, and she won. And Yuki was dishonoured in front of her sensei, and left America in shame. And Nicole gave up the way of the Bushido out of sadness at losing her friend. Read that again. She won, and she quit. That's the whole character in one sentence, honestly. She won the thing she'd trained her entire childhood for, and the cost was her only friend. And she looked at the trophy and decided it wasn't worth what it had taken, and she put the whole thing down and never picked it up again. And 30 years later, she still won't pick it up. Not because she can't win. She already knows she can win. That's the problem. Winning is exactly what caused all of this. Masami's version is a bit more romantic. She says her mother won't accept the fight because her heart is too pure to hurt a friend, her soul too noble, and Gumball asks her to stop please because she's laying it on thick. And they're right though. Mum won't fight a friend. So how does Yuki finally get her? She threatens the job and the house. That's it. That's the lever. Nicole will absorb the vandalism, the humiliation, the flirting with her husband, the mayonnaise, all of it, and she will not move. And then Yuki threatens to get her fired and have the house foreclosed, and Nicole gets in the car. Richard's exit line is that Nicole has to take care of some unfinished business. Don't follow her. It's too dangerous. There's leftover ham in the fridge and tater tots in the oven, and do not microwave them because they'll go soggy. I adore that. She's going off to a duel, and she's still doing the handover. The fight itself is guest animated by Studio 4DXC, and it's gorgeous. Both women rendered in proper detailed anime, more humanoid, flashy, the whole thing. Their kids watching in a super deformed chibi style, like something aimed at toddlers. Yuki has spent decades training in Japan and has developed the ability to fire energy blasts. Nicole can produce energy shields, which Yuki can't so. Fun fact, Ben Bokwele originally wanted Studio Trigger to animate it, and they were busy with other things, which is one of those production details where you go, right, but what a near miss. And here's the ending. Yuki's beaten. Nicole offers her a way out, and Yuki can't take it because pride, and she attacks, and the roof comes down on their children, and they stop. Instantly. Both of them. And they dig the kids out together. Then Yuki apologizes, and admits the whole thing was jealousy, and Nicole apologizes too, and tells her not to worry about it, and they hug and say how much they missed each other. And then the two of them take their children and hop home across the rooftops, which is lovely. And it's also not the end, because in a later episode called The Gourmet, they're back at each other as tensions flare again over food snobbery. Though the episode ultimately ends with the families bonding, the rift never actually closes, they just visit it less often, which is, I think, the most accurate thing this show has ever said about old friends. Oh, and the bit I always forget to mention. Before any of this kicks off in the cold open, Nicole's driving the kids to school, gets stuck in traffic, decides not to wait, pulls the children out of the car and hops her way across the motorway roof to roof. On the way, she foils a bank robbery. Not on purpose, it's just there and she goes through it. And the donut cop recognises her immediately, by name. He goes, "Hey, Mrs. Watterson, what about the..." And then he's hit by an enormous bag of money. He knows her. That's the joke. The police in this town know Nicole Watterson by sight and by name, and they are not surprised to see her clearing a bank robbery at speed on the school run. It takes about 40 seconds, and it's not the plot and nobody refers to it again. It's just there to establish that this is a normal Tuesday for her, so that when she turns around and walks away from a fight 9 minutes later, you understand exactly how much that costs. Now let's talk a little about the man everyone blames for all of it. So why is she with him? I'm asking sincerely. It's the question the entire fandom has been chewing on for over a decade. And it's the question the show itself keeps circling. And it's the question Richard asks about himself in the supermarket while a cloud woman flirts with him. The standard answer is that she settled, that she was young and rebelling against her parents, and picked the least suitable man available, specifically because he was unsuitable. And then the kids arrived, and by the time she looked up, it was too late. It's a tidy read. Loads of people hold it. I think it's wrong, and I want to have a go at why. Start with the facts, because they're better than the theory. They met young. Her family disapproved. His father walked out on him, and they went. Both of them, out of 2 houses, with nothing. They lived in a studio flat next to a train station and ate instant noodles. That's what The Choices shows you. Not a montage of struggle with sad music. A tiny flat and a train going past and 2 teenagers eating noodles. They got married in a park. Her parents didn't come. We'll get to why in a bit, and the reason is very stupid. But at the time, all she knew was that they didn't come. Then Gumball. And there's that shot of Richard holding him with a carton of milk taped to his stomach, feeding him, while Nicole sleeps, which is played as a joke about how useless he is. And it is a joke about how useless he is, but look at what's actually in the frame. He's up. She's asleep. He's figured out a solution. It's an idiotic solution. It works. Then the house. The dilapidated one they could just about afford, that they fixed up over months. He's painting the front of it when Gumball takes his first steps. They're both 38 now, by the way, which means all of that happened absurdly early. Their anniversary's the 1st of November. Now, here's the reading I actually believe, and you're allowed to disagree with me. I'm just some person talking. Nicole was raised as a project. We've covered that. Named after an outcome, timetabled into oblivion, graded continuously by 2 people who couldn't switch it off. Every single thing about her life until 18 was assigned. And then there's Richard. Richard is the least assigned thing that has ever existed. Richard has no expectations, not low expectations, none. He does not have an opinion about what she should have become, because he doesn't really have opinions about outcomes at all. He's not disappointed in her. He's not proud of her in that grasping way where the pride is really about them. He's just there, being fond of her, at a volume that never changes. For a woman who spent 18 years being appraised, that isn't settling. That's the only room in the world with no one grading her in it. And I think that's why the show keeps putting them in scenes where he diffuses her. In The Money, when she's turned into a hulking beast over the gold in the sea business, she's calmed down by Richard simply being charming at her. It's a gag. It's also the mechanism. He's the only thing in Elmore that can lower her temperature, and he does it by having no idea he's doing it. His line in the supermarket is the one that people quote, and I get why. Yuki asks what a man like him is doing with a woman like her, and he says, "Shh, I don't think she knows she could do better." Everyone reads that as tragic. Poor Richard, he knows he's punching above his weight. And, yeah, sure, but I'd flip it. He's not wrong that she could have done better on paper. The episode we talked about earlier ran the paper versions and they were a horror show. Harold with his cold sushi, the dictatorship, the dying. So what does better mean then? Better at what? There's a reading of this family I came across, and I think it's the strongest one going, which is that this marriage is fundamentally about breaking a cycle. Her parents were controlling and demanding. His mother Jojo was so overprotective, she made him what he is. His father, Frankie, was a deadbeat who wasn't around, and then turned up decades later trying to get free rent out of them. Between them, Nicole and Richard have 4 parents and roughly 0 examples, and what they do with their own 3 kids is give them freedom. Aggressively. They love them out loud and they let them be whatever mad thing they're going to be, and the kids are frankly a menace, and neither parent tries to make them into anything. That's not an accident. That's a decision made by 2 people who both know exactly what the other option feels like from the inside. Nicole could not have done that on her own. That's what I think. She had the discipline and the standards and the fury, and left to her own devices with a different husband, some competent, driving, ambitious man. I think she'd have become her mother in about 6 years. I think it'd have been quick. Richard is the counterweight. He is so profoundly incapable of applying pressure to another human being that he keeps her from applying it either. He's not a good father, let's be honest about it. He's not. But he's a load-bearing wall in a house that would otherwise have crushed those children under expectations. And I don't think Nicole knows that consciously, and I don't think it matters whether she does. Worth mentioning, and this is a fun one, that Ben Bockley based Richard on his own dad, who he's described as a giant man-child. Which means somewhere there's a man watching this show going, right, yes, fair enough. And I find that genuinely charming. So no, I don't think she settled. I think she made one choice in her whole life that was entirely hers, and she keeps interrogating that one specifically because it's the only one where she'd have nobody to blame. The smallest piece of evidence for all this is the one I keep coming back to. When Bockley was asked what Nicole would have made of Richard's appearance in an episode where he gets muscular, since she wasn't actually in that one, his answer was that she'd find him not squishy enough. Not squishy enough. That's the canonical position of Nicole Watterson on her husband's body. And I know it's a throwaway, it's a man answering a question, at a convention, or wherever, but it's the only direct statement we've got from the person who invented her about what she actually wants, and what she wants is for him to stay soft. Which, given everything else in her life, given the father with the temper and the mother with the standards and the tournament and the factory and the woman who called her a loser at her first steps, is not a joke. That's a woman who has been surrounded by hard edges since birth, choosing, on purpose, to live with the one thing in Elmore that has none. He is not squishy enough. He's never squishy enough. That's a permanent state, and she's not going to be satisfied. And I find that funnier and sadder every time I think about it. Anyway, speaking of blame, and of her parents not turning up to the wedding, let's do that. Because the reason is so stupid it's almost art. They thought RSVP was a town in Moldavia. That's the reason. That's why they weren't at the wedding. Nicole sent the invitation, and it said RSVP on it. And Daniel and Mary Senecourt looked at that and concluded it was an actual location, and went there instead of to the wedding. They wanted to come. That's the part that ruins me. They intended to attend. They got on a plane. And there is no town called RSVP in Moldova, which the show is well aware of. So what we're being asked to picture is 2 people wandering around Eastern Europe, looking for their daughter's wedding, while she stands in a park in Elmore, 20 years old, watching the entrance, and then not speaking to them again. Not once. The episode is The Parents, and the way it starts is so beautifully offhand. Gumball invites them over. Just does it. His stated reason is that they owe the kids a mountain of overdue Christmas presents, which is the most Gumball motivation possible, and also, accidentally, the only thing that could have made it happen. They drive home with the grandparents following behind. Nicole's grumbling about it, and then Richard starts talking to a tin of corned beef, saying something about how it's hard on the outside, but you've got to open it up, and Nicole thinks he's talking to her. He isn't. He's talking to the corned beef. He's fully talking to the corned beef, but she hears it as advice, and she says she hasn't spoken to her parents in a very long time, and there's so much bad blood between them, but she'll give it a chance. That's how the reconciliation of her entire adult life gets triggered. A rabbit having a conversation with a tin. What follows is a family standing around aloof from each other, and Gumball making a joke to lighten the mood, and the joke detonating a violent argument on the spot. And the rest of the Wattersons decide to sort it out by having everyone air their issues, which is when we get all the good stuff, the clubs, the blood type, the name, and the argument is genuinely painful in places because both sides are right and neither side can hear it. Mary says they gave her every chance to succeed. Daniel says they only wanted the best for her. And these are not lies. That's the horror of it. They're not villains twirling moustaches, they're two people who did a demonstrably bad job, whilst holding sincerely the belief that they were doing a good one. And Richard, who I said was useless, and who is, does something interesting here. He explains to the kids that Nicole and her parents have just been fighting for years, and it's not really clear whose fault it is anymore, which is annoyingly wise, because it's true, isn't it? At some point the origin stops mattering. The fight becomes its own thing with its own weather. You could probably settle the historical question if you sat down with the records, and it would change absolutely nothing, because the fight isn't about the records now. And then Nicole says the line. She's in the middle of listing the grievances, the clubs, the transfusion, the name, all of it. And it turns, and what comes out is that she just wants them back. That's all it was. 20 years of silence, and underneath it, that's the entire content. Not an apology, not an admission. She just wants them back. I think that lands so hard because of how it's structured. The show spends the whole episode letting her build the prosecution case, all these genuinely damning specifics, and then at the moment where you'd expect the verdict, she drops the case entirely. Because the case was never the point. The case was just the only way she had of talking about them at all. And the reconciliation happens. It's one of the things she actually completes in a show where nothing completes. She fixes it with her parents, or fixes it enough. And then the episode immediately undercuts it. Because Gumball explains that when he was singing about the Christmas presents the grandparents owe them, which disappoints everybody. And Darwin slams Gumball's head against the car window. And that's the end. That's the house style. You get the moment and then you get the head against the window. And I want to defend that, actually, because I think people read it as the show being unable to sit with sincerity. And I don't think that's it. I think it's a claim about how reconciliation actually goes. There isn't a swell of strings. You have the enormous conversation you've been avoiding your whole adult life, and it takes about 11 minutes, and it's mortifying. And then somebody says something stupid and you go home and put the kettle on. The moment doesn't get a frame around it. It just happens in the middle of a Tuesday, and then Tuesday carries on. If you got the strings, you'd know it mattered. That's the thing. Real life doesn't tell you which bits mattered until much later, usually at an inconvenient time, usually in a car park. There's a small detail I like from that episode's flashbacks. Young Yuki is in there, tackling Nicole during a school karate match. So the two women who define her childhood are in the same set of memories. And the show doesn't do anything with that. It just puts her in the background, because she was in the background, because that's where the people who shape you tend to be. There's a slightly harder thing under this episode that I don't think gets discussed much, and it's what the silence actually cost. Because it's not just that she didn't speak to them, it's what didn't happen in the meantime. Gumball is 12, Anais is 4. Darwin arrived somewhere in there, so her children have grown up entirely inside the silence. They have never had grandparents on that side. Not estranged grandparents they knew about, just an absence with no shape to it, which is why Gumball can invite them over as a joke about Christmas presents. He doesn't know what he's touching. Nobody told him it was hot, and Nicole didn't tell him. That's the choice she made every single day, silently, without ever framing it as a choice. You could argue she was protecting them, from Daniel, who gave his daughter the wrong blood out of pride, and from Mary, who would have started grading the grandchildren before the coats were off. That's a real defence, and I'd probably make it in her position. But the version her kids got wasn't protection. It was just nothing. There was a hole in the family and no explanation for the hole, and children fill holes with whatever's lying around, which is usually themselves, and then a rabbit talks to a tin of corned beef, and it's over. All that time, undone by a misunderstanding about tinned meat, which, when I put it like that, sounds like I'm mocking it. I'm not. I think that's exactly right. That's how these things end. Not because someone finally does the work, because the conditions accidentally line up for 11 minutes, and somebody's in the right mood, and the door's open, and you walk through it before you've thought about it properly. If she'd thought about it properly, she'd still be out there. Anyway, since we're on the subject of the other women in Nicole's life, I want to talk about the mothers of Elmore, because as a group they're doing something the show almost never gets credit for. Line the mothers of Elmore up next to each other, and you've got a class system. That's not a reading I went looking for. It's just there once you notice it. This show about a talking cat has a fully functioning social hierarchy, and every mother in it occupies a specific rung. And Nicole's rung is near the bottom, and she knows it. Top of the pile, Yuki Yoshida. Her husband owns the factory, mansion, butler, chef, the lot. Then Felicity Parham, who is a snob of the purest kind, so convinced of her own superiority that the show has more or less confirmed her ego has done structural damage to her personality. Then Nicole, on what she earns, riding an angry dog. And then there's Granny Jojo, who exists in her own category, which is the category of mother-in-law, and who Nicole finds obnoxious and honestly fair. The episode that does the class thing properly is the gourmet. Gumball's sick of chicken nuggets at school and gets obsessed with Masami's fancy mac and cheese. So there's this whole business of him being trained in the ways of the Yoshida family so he can be allowed to have dinner at their house. Which is already funny, the idea that you'd need coaching to eat pasta. And Nicole says the thing that I think is the truest line in her whole run. She tells Gumball they're not lesser people for having less money. That's it. That's the entire lesson delivered flat outside the house. Not a speech, she doesn't build to it. And it's such a specifically parental thing to say, because she's saying it to a 12-year-old who has just been made to feel small. And she's also, obviously, saying it to herself, because she's the one who works in that man's building. And then, and this is why I love her, she finds out Yuki's been insulting her. And she gets Yuki's phone app, the one that controls the smart house, and she uses it to wreck the mansion from the outside. She has just finished explaining that money doesn't make you a better person, and then she immediately weaponizes the rich woman's smart home against her. Both things happen in one episode. Nobody comments. The butler and the chef both quit and leave with the Wattersons, incidentally, which is a nice touch. And the ending is that Masami just orders chicken nuggets, and Yuki, defeated, admits she wants some too, which is the show's actual position on class, I think. Everyone secretly wants the nuggets. Granny Jojo calls her a bad mother in that episode, by the way, and Nicole mocks their lifestyle. So we're right back in it. The hug on the rooftop was real, and this is also real, and both of those are how it works with someone you've known since you were 8. Now here's the one that got me. There's an episode called The Web, where we see Nicole's profile on Elmore Plus, which is the show's social network, and on it, her friends list is her family, and Yuki. Yuki is her only non-family friend on the entire list. That's a woman who has, at the time of that episode, recently sprayed the word coward on her car, set fire to her lawn, taken her desk, flirted with her husband, filled her sandwich with mayonnaise, and threatened to have her house repossessed. Only friend. I sat with that for a while, honestly, because it explains the whole Fury business retroactively, doesn't it? It's not that Nicole wouldn't fight a friend out of some noble Bushido principle. It's that Yuki is the friend. Singular. There's no second one. If you win that fight, you're the only person in Elmore with nobody to ring. And then think about the birthday card in the memory box, kept for 30-odd years, through the estrangement, through the harassment, through the car being sprayed. You don't keep the card if you've got other cards. I think this is where the show is doing its quietest work, actually, because Nicole is surrounded. She has a husband, 3 kids, a job, a whole town of people who know her name. She is never once alone on screen for very long. And she has one friend, and it's her enemy. And the friendship is 30 years expired, and neither of them will file the paperwork. That's not a tragedy the show ever names. It just leaves it on a fake social media profile in an episode about something else entirely, and if you notice it, you notice it. Compare that to Felicity Parham, who has a rivalry with Nicole running through several episodes, and who is, in fairness, easier to dislike than Yuki because there's no history to complicate it. Felicity's just snobbery with a haircut. Nicole's contempt for her is uncomplicated and therefore much less interesting. It's the Yuki relationship that has teeth, because it's the only one where losing would cost her something. And Jojo, Richard's mum, is the other pole. Nicole antagonises her regularly, and it's not entirely fair, and I'll say that plainly. Jojo is obnoxious, but Jojo also raised Richard, and did it in her own way, with actual care, which is more than either of Nicole's parents managed, and Nicole doesn't give her much credit for it, which is a very human failure. It's easier to be generous about the people who hurt you than the people who irritate you. There's an asymmetry here I only clocked recently. Every other mother in Elmore is defined by her husband. Yuki's husband owns the factory, and that's her power. That's the entire source of it. Felicity's status is her household. Jojo's whole personality is her son. Nicole's husband is Richard. So she's the only woman in that hierarchy with no borrowed standing whatsoever. Whatever she's got, she brought. Which sounds like a compliment and is actually the reason she's near the bottom of it. Because in a town like that, what you brought yourself is worth considerably less than what you married. And she knows. That's the bit. She's not naive about it. She works in Yuki's husband's building, at a desk Yuki can take off her whenever she fancies, and she goes back the next day and puts the pin on. There's a version of Nicole who plays that game, who does what Felicity does, who leverages what little she's got, who works the hierarchy. She'd be good at it too. She's got the discipline for it. She just doesn't. And I don't think it's principle exactly. I think it's that she was raised by 2 people who were entirely about position, about the A+ and the doctor and the every possible chance. And somewhere at 18, she made a decision about that which she has never revisited, and probably couldn't articulate if you asked her. The Nuggets line is the whole thing, really. Not lesser people for having less money. That's not a lesson she's passing on to Gumball. That's a position she took at 18 in a house she walked out of, and she's still holding it from inside a locker. I don't think that's nothing. I think that might be the most stubborn thing about her, and she's a woman who once went at a moving car with a family in the back. Anyway, that's a good bridge into something I've been putting off for about an hour and a half now, which is the part where I stop building the case for her. She robs Larry. That's the one I keep having to hold on to. In The Money, when the family's broke, she breaks into Larry's shop while he's actively pleading with her not to. And then when he tells her she owes $300 in fees, she and the kids simply run away. Larry, who works dozens of jobs and has never had a good day in his life. So there's another column, and I've been quietly not reading it out. In an episode called The Hero, Gumball and Darwin make fun of Richard in front of their friends, which is horrible of them, to be clear. They're the ones who start it. And Nicole's response, along with Anais, is to withhold food from them. And bathing. She won't let them eat, and she won't let them wash. That's not discipline. Let's not do the thing where we find a word for it. She starved and neglected her children for a day because they were rude about her husband. And Gumball is awful in that episode, but he's 12, and she isn't. In the fridge, she's so competitive that Gumball, who is the least self-aware creature in the Western Hemisphere, calls her out on it. When Gumball notices your behaviour, you have gone quite far. In The Meddler, she treats him like a baby to the point of humiliating him at school repeatedly after being asked to stop. There's an episode where she leaves him in the desert. That happens. We covered the helmet already, so I'll just gesture at it. Tantrum, job gone, blames Richard, never revisits it. And the town, by the way, has form here. The residents of Elmore actively dislike the Wattersons for the chaos they cause. There's an episode where they get run out of town, not framed, not misunderstood, punished harshly, even attacked by their neighbours for the damage they cause. You can see this reflected in how the internet has tried to file her. She's got a page on the Heroes wiki. She's got a page on the Villains adjacent wikis. And there's a whole wiki category called Inconsistently Admirable, which exists specifically for characters who won't sit still. And she's on that one too. 3 different taxonomies, 3 different answers, all of them citing the same episodes. I don't think that's a failure of the wikis. I think it's the correct result. And here's where I actually want to land, because this is the bit I find properly interesting. And it's the closest thing this video has to a real idea. In the series finale, the show confirms something that fans had suspected for years. The Wattersons canonically return to the status quo between almost every episode. It's stated, it's a rule of their reality. They cannot accumulate consequences. Whatever happened last week did not stick, which means Nicole cannot grow, not won't, can't. It's a physical property of the universe she lives in. She goes to the anger management group, and the group cannot work. Not because the group's bad, though it is, but because the machinery of her world resets her every episode. She reconciles with her parents, and it holds, mostly, because the show decided to let that one hold. She apologises to Yuki, and by the gourmet they're sniping again. So when I say Nicole never learns anything, I'm not being clever. I'm describing the physics, and that reframes the whole cruelty column for me, honestly. Because you can't hold someone to a growth standard in a world that's confiscated growth. She's not refusing to improve. She's a woman doing the same day forever, with full memory of every previous version of it, and no ability to bank anything from any of them. You'd be furious too. You'd absolutely rob Larry. I'm not letting her off, mind. The desert thing is the desert thing. And I'd say the show's a bit inconsistent about whether it wants us to notice, which is a real criticism, not a defence dressed up as one. Sometimes she's the moral centre, and sometimes she's the joke, and the writers pick whichever they need that week. And if you find that annoying, you're not wrong. But I think the reason she reads as more real than the rest of Elmore isn't that she's better. It's that she's the only one for whom the reset is a cost. Gumball doesn't care that nothing sticks. Richard is arguably happier for it. Aeneas is 4. Nicole is the only person in that house who was ever building towards something, which makes her the only person the reset is actually taking something from. She's the only one in the room who can feel the room. Actually, hang on, one more, because it's the one that bothers me most and I nearly let myself off. Miss Simeon is the point where I have to be fair to Nicole and unfair at the same time, and it's uncomfortable. Because there's a cameo. In a completely different Cartoon Network show, villainous, there's a high school photo, and Nicole's in it, among a group of villains. And in another bit of it, it's shown that throughout high school, Nicole bullied a character called Dr. Flug. Now that's a crossover gag in another programme, and I'd never treat it as load-bearing canon. Let's be clear about that. It's a wink. But it sits there, doesn't it? Because the shape of it is that the woman who was called a loser at her own first steps went to school and found someone smaller. And if that is true, in whatever loose sense a cameo can be true, then the Simeon flashback stops being a story about a victim and becomes a story about a transmission. It got handed down, she took it and passed it on. The way she took the temper from her father and the standards from her mother, and the whole apparatus from a house she left at 18. That's the thing nobody wants in the portrait. It's much nicer if the hurt stops with her. Everybody likes a character who absorbs it and doesn't pass it on, because that's the fantasy, isn't it? That suffering makes you kind. It mostly doesn't. It mostly makes you tired and then it makes you look for somebody to be tired at. I'd say Nicole does better than she was done to. That's my honest read. And it's not nothing. It's actually enormous. Her kids are loud and free and unmanaged, and they've got no idea how lucky they are. She broke most of it. Just not all of it. Anyway, that's about as unkind as I'm going to be. Let's finish somewhere warmer, because there's a real woman at the bottom of all this, and I think she deserves the last section. So there's a real one. Obviously, there's a real one. Ben Bocquelet, who made this show, named her after his mother, Nicole Bocquelet, a working mother. Same name, same maiden name. And in an interview, he describes his mum. And I want to get the phrasing right because the phrasing is the whole thing. As his kick-ass mum. That's what he said. Not hard-working, not long-suffering, kick-ass. And once you've got that, the flaming eyeballs stop being a gag and start being a portrait. Somebody's son looked at his mother and thought, right, when she's crossed the room should catch fire. That's not a joke about a shrill cartoon housewife. That's a boy's honest sense of scale. The rest of the family's the same, by the way. Richard's named for his dad, who he's called a giant man-child. Anais is his sister. And the surname Watterson is a nod to Bill Watterson, who made Calvin and Hobbes, which explains a lot about the show's whole deal now that I say it out loud. So the Wattersons are the Bocquelets with the surname of the man who drew Calvin and Hobbes, which is a sentence I'd like to have on a plaque somewhere. But here's the detail I actually brought you here for, and it's the reason I wanted this section last. According to Sylvain Mark, a character designer who helped develop the show, Nicole was originally conceived as an absent mother. Not a bad mother, not a dead one, absent specifically because she'd be too busy with work to be in the show. She was never going to appear on screen. That was the design. A mum who exists as a phone call and an empty chair, because that's what a working mother looks like, from a kid's height. She's at the factory. She'll be back later. She's not in the shot. And instead, she opens the series. Nicole delivers the first line in the show, in airing order, first character to speak. In the DVD, which is also the episode where she chases her children across the neighbourhood on a dog, I don't think you could design a better accident than that. The character built to be an absence is the first voice you hear. I don't want to over-egg it, because I doubt anyone planned it. Somebody at some point just went, actually, she's funny, put her in. That's probably all it was, but it's still the neatest thing about her, that the concept was a woman defined by not being there, and what came out the other end is the one person in Elmore who is unavoidably, constantly, exhaustingly present. She's in everything. She's the load-bearing wall of the entire show. You cannot make Gumball without her, and the original plan was to make Gumball without her. The voice, while we're here, is Teresa Gallagher. British actress doing an American accent, and doing it well, but not perfectly. And I mean that as a compliment. It slips. It slips in The Job, when she's explaining they have to stop Richard from destroying the universe. It slips in The Mothers, when she thinks the escalator's broken, and it slips, reliably, on the word anything. Listen for it. Once you hear it, you'll hear it forever. And I'm sorry. Gallagher also voices Penny and Terry, and if you grew up over here, she's Emily and Mavis in Thomas and Friends. So there's a decent chance this woman has been in your house since you were small, and you never once noticed. The other origin fact I love is that Gumball didn't start as a family show at all. Bocquelet's first pitch was about reject cartoon characters at a remedial school, characters nobody had wanted, in a place for the leftovers, and the producers said it was too sad. Too sad, so he made it a family sitcom instead, and it got made and it ran for years. But you can still see the original show in there if you squint. Elmore is full of leftovers. That's the whole cast. Rejected commercial characters, given a town, and Nicole is a woman who was rejected as a concept and given the first line. Bocquelet said something about the revival that stuck with me. That the ideas come from their private lives, stuff they share, thinking it's amongst friends and in a safe space. And then, no, actually, we can make money with it. He's joking. He's also not. Which means all of this, the money and the name and the list and the temper, came out of somebody's actual house. Not literally. I'm not suggesting his mum could set marshmallows alight with her eyes, though I'd like to think so. But the shape of it, the shape came from somewhere real. The last thing I'll say about the real one, and I'm aware I'm speculating now, so take it as speculation. There's a version of this where a man makes a show about his family, and it's a bit of a love letter, and everyone's slightly nicer than they were. That's the normal way you round your mother up. He didn't round her up. He gave her a salary that doesn't cover the week, and a temper she can't control, and a list she never finished, and one friend who hates her. He gave her a first name that's somebody else's ambition. He put her in a job with no visible purpose and let the town resent her, and she's still, unambiguously, the best character in it. Not despite all that, because of it, which suggests to me that he wasn't writing a tribute. He was just writing what he saw, and what he saw was a woman doing an unwinnable sum every morning, and being brilliant, and being frightening, and being wrong quite a lot, and coming back the next day. Kick ass, that's the word he used, and I thought, when I first read it, that it was a slightly glib way to describe your own mum. Now I think it might be the only accurate one, because it doesn't say she was good or kind or happy. It says she went at it. There's something in the fact that he made the show at all too. He was at a studio helping other people pitch their ideas. Helping other people. For years he did that, and then somebody said, "Right, you have a go," and he reached back and pulled out his mum and his dad and his sister and put them in a town full of rejects. And here's the last thing, and then I'll shut up about him. Nicole was designed to be too busy working to appear. He put her in anyway. Many episodes, first line. I think that's a son doing something. I don't know what, but something. And she's still there is the thing. The revival's running. She's still at the factory. So that's her more or less. As much as you can get of a person out of a cartoon anyway. I'm not going to summarise it. There's no shape to summarise. She's a woman with a job that doesn't pay, a name that isn't hers, a list she didn't finish, a temper she can't put down, one friend who hates her, and 3 children who will never have any idea what any of that cost. The revival's going, if you didn't know. New episodes, she's still at the factory, still wearing the pin. I keep coming back to something I said near the start and then walked away from, which is that she's not a stoic. I want to land that properly before I stop, because I think it's the only thing in here that's actually mine, and not just the show's. The Stoics were after tranquility. That was the whole point. Order your inner life, and the outside loses its grip, and you end up, if not happy, then at least unbothered, which is lovely. It's also a philosophy for people with the leisure to arrange an interior. She hasn't got one spare afternoon. Never has. She can't arrange the interior because the interior is where the sun lives, running all the time. Like a fan, you only notice when the room goes quiet. That's not a philosophy. That's a condition. And I think that's the quiet claim this daft show about a blue cat is making, which is that a fair whack of what we call character is really just whatever your circumstances left in the tin. And I find that oddly comforting, honestly. Not because it's a happy ending. It isn't one. It isn't an ending at all. But because there's something quite nice about a character who was designed as an absence, just carrying on being there. Turning up. Doing the sum. I might do Richard at some point. I've got about 40 minutes on the corned beef alone. And there's a whole thing about Elmore being made of rejected commercial characters that I keep circling and never quite land. So that might be a video, or it might just be me at 1 in the morning again. Anyway, ham's in the fridge. Tater tots are in the oven. Don't microwave them.